Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Merchant, Senior Director of Early Childhood Education, Policy and Programs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and I'm thrilled to be continuing the conversation with Mayor Todd Barton of Crawfordsville, Indiana. Mayor Todd, tell us a little bit more about yourself and about Crawfordsville.
Hello. Well, I'm Todd Barton, the mayor of Crawfordsville, Indiana. Crawfordsville is a city of about 16,000 with a county population of about 38,000, and we're about 35 miles northwest of Indianapolis, located about halfway between the city of Indianapolis and the Illinois line. So pretty centrally located in the state of Indiana. I'm currently in my fourth term as mayor of Crawfordsville. Started serving in 2012. Have really been focused on community development, economic development, and really, trying to change how we're doing things in our community so that we become a really a place of choice for the next generation to live.
So, Mayor Barton, before we dig into the early childhood education piece of Crawfordsville, just out of curiosity, I got to know, what were you doing before you were Mayor Barton, and what made you want to run for mayor?
Yeah, so I've been with the city since I was 18 and graduated from high school, and before I even went to college, I started working for the city. But I was a career firefighter paramedic, and through the different parts of city government, was a department leader for a while, was fire chief, emergency medical director, and those things. And the decision to run for mayor was just, out of love for my community. I absolutely love Crawfordsville. I think it's a great community full of caring people. It has an amazing history. And, when you work inside city government, you're asking yourself continuously if we could do things better. And I felt like we could. And I felt like it was my opportunity to step up and really lead the way and guide my community in Crawfordsville into the future. And so that was the decision. And I'll tell you, the first term is a little challenging, right? You're trying to kind of clean some things up and build a foundation. And now I tell everybody we're in the fun part because we've built the foundation and we're off and running and good things are happening.
That's an incredible origin story and just a life of civil service. And I think it's telling that looking at what is best for the community, what can we be doing better, that you landed on as one of your priorities, early childhood education. Before we talk kind of specifically about the approach that you and the city took, can you speak a little bit on how you came to land on early childhood education as a priority and something that you really wanted to carry the torch for?
Oh, absolutely. So, we really pride ourselves on listening to our employers and the businesses in our community. And our economic development program is really built on a system of business retention visits. So we go visit all of our employers. We spend time sitting at the table with them to understand what's working and what's not in our community, where the challenges might lie and how we might help address those challenges. And, obviously the first thing we were really hearing was that workforce was a challenge. We don't have enough workers to fill the positions we have right here in this community. And as we started to dive a little deeper, we were consistently hearing, in the top one or two reasons for that, the lack of childcare in our community. And, on the surface, I thought that would be a very easy problem to solve. If we don't have enough childcare, we'll go out and recruit childcare providers to come to our community and life goes on and things will be good. And I quickly discovered a couple of things. One, that's not easy to do because the business of childcare is kind of a broken model and it doesn't work. And, in a smaller community like ours, the numbers just didn't make sense for a provider to come in. And then second thing I discovered was that we not only had a quantity problem with childcare seats, we had a quality problem as well. We did not have enough seats on, in high quality programs. So there were two different things going on. And really for me and for our community, it was about the workforce of today and also starting very early to create that pipeline, the workforce for tomorrow. So that really started the conversation. Out of that, I brought it to our workforce group, and we formed a task force that really started trying to look for solutions. And I think in the early days, we were looking for the really easy things. There's a grant here, or there's a grant there, and we'll pull this all together. And as this evolved, we discovered that it was far more complex. And we ended up partnering with our Montgomery County Community Foundation and several other entities in our community to pull everybody together to really create a solid, robust plan. And the conclusion was that, business and industry couldn't solve this on their own. City government couldn't solve this on its own. County government couldn't solve it. And philanthropy couldn't necessarily solve it on their own. What we knew is we all had to come together to create a system where we all contribute in some way to make it successful. Because if we want, I spend much time talking about young families and getting young people in our community and keeping the next generation here. If we want those young families and we want a vibrant workforce, we have to provide adequate childcare so that people can go to work and not be worried about their children. The top thing we heard from employers, it was costing productivity. And it was also, from people either not working or for people being at work and then having to leave or needing to worry about their children and everything. About the same time, Indiana University had done some studies. And so we were classified coming out of that study as a childcare desert. And I think that really opened eyes in the community, and they attached numbers to that. So we were able to show actual numbers where, less than 3% of our children under the age of 6 were in high quality childcare programs. That was alarming to people. And it also concluded that there was a direct $7.9 million impact annually to our businesses in lost productivity. And if you looked at the overall economy, that number was even bigger. So when you attached real numbers to it, it wasn't just a problem for business to figure out or for families to figure out. All of a sudden, everybody understood this was a much deeper problem and a community-wide problem.
Well, and Mayor Barton, I think that the first two parts of your journey are ones that have been shared by a lot of people. It's the recognition that childcare is an issue, and then the growing recognition that it's not an easy issue to solve. It's not, there's not necessarily, there are smaller things that can be done, but there's not necessarily low-hanging fruit that will solve the problem at its core. And you also recognize that there's not one single entity that can solve it. And so it sounds like you circled the wagons, you brought a lot of different people to the table, literally and figuratively. And so, like I said, the first two parts, a lot of people share that story, but the third part is why we really wanted to hear from you. And how did you take all of those data points? How did you take all of those community relationships and turn it into a more sustainable solution to meet the needs of working parents in your community?
Yeah, it was a total team effort. And I think, we often hear that one of the great strengths of our community is collaboration and people willing to come to the table. We do it in many other things. So the model was already there. We do it in healthcare. We do it in some other areas. And so it was really kind of replicating that model and ultimately finding the group that could lead this effort. I think city government could have led it. Maybe county government could have led it. But, we're busy. We have things happening in a lot of different directions. And I felt like we needed somebody standing outside government a little bit to help us, to maybe bridge between government and business. And that's why we brought the foundation in. And the Community Foundation has done a fantastic job. And if you look at their structure, they have a great staff, but they also have a board that's filled with very talented people who've done great things and have business minds and so on and so forth. So, it was creating that structure and that environment. But ultimately, it comes down to everybody coming to the table, to work together collaboratively and not be concerned about, who's getting credit for this. And, I have maybe a rub with, this organization on another issue. There are groups in here that maybe don't always agree on certain things, but on this issue, they agreed to come together, roll up their sleeves and work alongside one another. And there's an expectation in our community that groups do that. And I think we're very unique and we stand out in that regard. And that's really what pushed us over the edge in making this happen. And when you do that and you create that structure, then you have really the credibility to start getting support from business and industry. It's one thing to convince, local government and locals, the local foundation to invest. But in our case, convincing business and industry means we're convincing leaders outside our community, because none of our businesses are headquartered here. They're off in other cities. And so, convincing them that we have the capacity and the leadership in this community and a plan that warrants them investing substantial amounts of money in what we're doing is something that's not easy to do and something we took very seriously. So that was kind of the next step of that as well.
And so I'd love to hear more about that specific point, Mayor Barton. So walk us through kind of the end result. You know, is it one center? Are there several centers? Is there a network? And then that business investment.
Yeah.
What does that sort of in a specific sense look like, especially for communities of your size that have sort of completed steps 1 and 2, where they understand it's a problem, they understand they need to come together. But that business investment in the solution that y'all came up with. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so we were able to put that together, and what we ended up doing is, creating a model to create an early learning center in our community, keeping in mind that we're a childcare desert and we don't want to harm the existing providers. So we didn't want this to come online and then others start, not be able to deal with the pressure and maybe attract employees away and those kind of things, and they collapse, because that would defeat the whole purpose. So that was the first thing that we really took into consideration. As we set about fundraising, we had another great concern, and that was we had looked at communities and saw where they had raised enough money to build the facility, opened it up, and didn't really take into account operations and the cost of operations long term. And within a year or two, here's this great facility that's now closed. And we did not want to be in that situation. So we set the bar higher. We knew what it was going to cost to build the facility. We added in extra fundraising goals there to make sure we had sustainability. And we didn't move forward with construction until we knew we had enough money to sustain this longer term. The end result was it's under construction right now. The Early Learning Center is a $5 million project. We'll provide 124 seats, high quality seats on Indiana's Path to Quality program. Will be complete probably in the first quarter of 25, and will open to students in the summer, like right when traditional school lets out in the summer of 25. So that gives us time to get the construction done, and then the provider to come in, the operator of the facility to come in and get their licensing requirements done and everything. The actual funding, the way it ended up breaking down, local government and state government equals about 26% of that goal. So we, city and the county, largely stepped up there. We have some grant funding from the state of Indiana, which has been fantastic. Businesses equate to 31% of the funding, and then philanthropy 43%. And philanthropy is a combination of our community foundation and then private donors who stepped up at various levels. The incentive for the businesses, and we spent time going around talking to businesses about this, was that if they contribute to this, depending on the level of their contribution, they get priority seating for their employees. So we had to show some tangible benefit, when we're convincing that corporate headquarters somewhere else to invest in this project in Montgomery County. And that really resonated with them. So there are different levels at which they can contribute, and based on that level, they get so many seats set aside that are priority for their employees. And that's very powerful, because some of these businesses are really struggling to fill positions because of childcare. So that's how that ended up shaking out. We have 13 businesses that have contributed in a significant way, in addition to city government, county government, state government, and then the private donors.
Honestly, that's incredible. I appreciate the specificity, the statistics, the percentages, because just even in the time that I've worked at the chamber, it's gone from a very high level, like, do you guys think childcare is impacting the workforce, to no, but what do we do in a literal sense?
Yeah.
And so I feel like this case study is going to be incredibly helpful, especially, and I know I've mentioned this once or twice, but it's communities, counties, the size of Crawfordsville. I think that sometimes not overlooked, but you kind of look at, major urban metropolitan centers and, childcare deserts in that sense, and then extremely rural or extremely agricultural communities where it's, towns 200, 300 people. And so those sort of mid-sized towns, I think, can get lost in the shuffle a little bit. So I think this is just a fascinating, real-time case study in terms of how communities can come together to solve those problems. You've been so generous with your time, Mayor Barton. I just have 2 quick questions. The first is in Crawfordsville, what are the sort of major sectors or industries that a lot of the folks and maybe especially some of the businesses that have bought in represent?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Crawfordsville, despite being in rural Indiana, is a very industrial driven community. We have a long history of manufacturing in our community. So, our real strength lies in the diversity of our manufacturing. We're not really tied to one sector. So, when you think about what's happening in this community, you have steel. We have a steel mill here with Nucor Steel, and then some spinoffs from that, which are very large employers. Lakeside Book Printing is here. So, printing books. If you're reading hardcover books, there's a good chance it came from Crawfordsville, Indiana. They're one of our larger employers. Acuity Brands Lighting is here. International Paper is here, making corrugated cardboard boxes. And as I remind everybody, people are shopping online. Guess what they need? They need a corrugated box to go with that. So we have that going on. We have dairy processing here with the Kroger company. We have some auto parts manufacturing. So it's really spread across many different sectors, which has been our strength. If one's down or off a little, the others tend to do well. When we look at the partners in this, one of the first partners to jump on board was one of our newest corporate citizens, and that's the Tempur Sealy Corporation. They have built a new manufacturing facility here in Crawfordsville that pours foam and makes the high-end foam mattresses. They were concerned before they ever came to our community about the child care situation, and they had seen it in their other facilities. So they wanted to be proactive and get ahead of that. So they're one of our big partners. As I said, Nucor Steel, Lakeside Book, go down the list. They've all bought in and agreed to help on this front. And then just, even city government, county government as an employer, it's important that we're, part of this because, we were seeing, as I was hearing employers talk about this challenge and this issue, I was seeing it right here in City Hall. I had key staff members who are also young parents. They were struggling, at times. What am I going to do with my child because childcare has fallen through? So all of that came together. But that's really a little bit about the landscape of what's here.
No, that's incredibly helpful and really paints a picture. Final question. I know you've got lots on your plate running a city. Where does the term Hoosier come from?
We don't know. How's that?
That's even better. That's the best answer.
There's a lot of speculation about that, and the main speculation is people yelling in the woods like "Who's there?" kind of thing. But I don't think there's an official answer from that. So I don't know the answer there.
I didn't look it up specifically because I wanted to ask you, and there not really being an origin is even better than like a speculation. So I love that. Yeah. Mayor Barton, thank you again so much, both for joining us at the National Child Care Innovation Summit in DC last June, and for joining us again here on Continuing the Conversation. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.